You are listening to the Truly Christian Podcast with biblical teachings on current and controversial topics by Quentin Walton. Subscribe, pull up a chair, and join the conversation. Find out what it really means to be a Christian. Good day to you, Bible buddies. Today's episode is brought to you by a good cup of Joe. Hey, everybody needs a good cup of coffee in the morning. And personally, I use Sam's Club's light roast blend. Now, when it comes to coffee, I found this out years ago that actually the lighter roast has the highest caffeine in it. And so if you want a good energy boost for the morning, get a light roast coffee. And that's what I'm drinking this morning. Hey, glad to be back with you today for this episode as we cover ghosts in the Bible. Ghosts and demons and things like that are the most requested episodes. In fact, the first request for an episode I have is two topics, and that is ghosts and capital punishment. And so I'm going to honor my word that I gave you in a previous episode, and I'm going to address both of those topics. The first person I said that sent in something, I was going to address it no matter what it was. And so we have ghosts, and I want to give a shout out to Braxton Strickland from my school. He gave me the topic of ghosts, and so that's what we're going to do today. And then we're going to do the other one on another day. But we're going to talk about ghosts in the Bible. Are ghosts rather biblical? Is it something that is a real thing? Or is it just made up? If you ask a lot of different Christians, many of them will differ on this one. They'll have different opinions and different views about this, and from all kinds of sects of Christianity, they'll believe differently. But we got to ask ourselves, as we always do, is our view biblical, or is it just based on our traditions? Many times I'll hear somebody say, no, I don't believe in ghosts. But I asked them, where is your biblical evidence that there are no ghosts or that there are ghosts? We always have to have our Bible as the foundation of all of our beliefs. Now, as we talk about ghosts, I want to tie this into Christmas. Here we are, I believe, just about 19 or 20 days from Christmas. And I don't know about you, but I've already been listening to Christmas music before Thanksgiving. In fact, it may have been November 1st when I started listening to Christmas music. I tried to wait. I promise you, I tried to hold out and give it a little bit more time. But riding down the road, the Christmas music comes on. Even just listening to Caleb came on in between songs. I was like, oh, you got me. So we started listening to Christmas music from radio to our phones. So it hasn't stopped. So I'm not completely tired of it yet, but I know I'm going to get there here soon of being sick and tired of it. But nonetheless, let's talk about Christmas and ghosts. Here's an interesting thing when we're talking about the subject of ghosts. We're going to get into the Bible here in just a little bit. But ghosts and Christmas are tightly tied in our nation's history. You said, what? How are ghosts and Christmas related? When you think about Christmas, we're thinking about, presents and the birth of Christ and a joyful time and with the family and stuff. Well, our traditions are not the same as the traditions of early America. And apparently, in early America, they told ghost stories at Christmas time. That's something we've kind of gone away from. We do that on Halloween and we leave that there. But apparently, they would tell these ghost stories around Christmas time, sitting around the fire or on Christmas or whatever the case may have been. That was a tradition. You say, how do you know that? Well, some research and also one of your favorite songs. There'll be parties for hosting, marshmallows for toasting, and caroling out in the snow. There'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago. And so ghost stories were a part of the Christmas tradition years ago. And we got some other things. I thought this was very interesting that I found in my studies, and I want to share those with you today. So there's this tradition, there's this origin of Christian, I'm sorry, not Christian, but Christmas ghost stories related to each other. So pre-Christian winter traditions. All right, so let's talk about some of those. In many European cultures, the winter solstice was seen as like a thin time when spirits could cross into the living world. So we talk about Halloween, that's the day where the veil between the spirit world and this world is the thinnest. But they would believe at one time that the winter solstice was that thin time where spirits could cross into this living world. You say, what do you mean by pre-Christian? That's what it's given in my studies, but really it's before the medieval times is what it means. But let's talk about the medieval times themselves. So before it became family focused, Christmas was seen as a season of feasting, drinking, and storytelling, where scary stories were part of the standard entertainment. Okay, so that's the medieval and before. Then in the Victorian era, Christmas was revived around in the 1800s, and they mixed old folklore with new traditions. And this is getting into closer to what we do today. But again, there's several different, practices and traditions in these times. But winter evenings by the fire, that was a time to tell eerie stories. This is the Victorian era. Now, some of those the your big stories and your most well known stories that push to that. One of them being A Christmas Carol. Right, we love A Christmas Carol. I went to Pensacola Christian College one year to watch them do a play, A Christmas Carol. They put on the play, and it was excellent. I think that story has good morals. It's spooky, and it ties into Christmas. I think it brings all the feels along with it. And so during that time period, 1843, A Christmas Carol comes out, which is, a ghost story wrapped in moral themes, teaching a man to be thankful for his days on Christmas and not to be so grumpy and appreciate every second that he lives. And also during that time, the magazines of the Victorian era, there in the 1800s, regularly published Christmas ghost stories, making it a entertainment for the people. They would take the paper, they would read the paper, and I'm sure kids would go to the ghost story section and were waiting to hear of those things. And so they would read those things. And then also, there's just a good, thought around why ghosts fit Christmas. So Christmas is a time of reflection, right? Encourages you to look back. And I've known this as I've grown older in life that Christmas is really not always a pleasant time for people, because you have people that, maybe have passed away during this time, people that have gone through, severe trauma around this time period, around Christmas time, and they don't look to it as joyful, maybe as some other kids or some other people do. But nonetheless, it is a time of reflection. You're at the end of the year, and we are celebrating our life this year. We remember the people that were in our lives, people that we might have lost, and people that are still alive that we want to see back in our lives. So it's a time of reflection. And in that, you think about these people, and it brings up ghosts in these early 1800s as people, coming back from the dead. There's also this contrast of light and dark. We're talking about the light shining out of the darkness, especially with the Christmas story, a dark time period in history, and Jesus shines as this bright light in the world. And so you could see this tie between reflecting on things, the themes of light and darkness, all those things happening. And also community began to get stronger there in the early 1800s. Community as in neighborhoods and people coming together, and they would tell these spooky stories around a fire, as part of this bonding thing they wanted to do. Now, along with A Christmas Carol, which we have by Charles Dickens, we also have a few other ghost stories that he told, and as well as M.R. James, who wrote Ghost Stories for Christmas, and that's a tradition. British TV's annual Christmas ghost adaptations, that's the 20th century. These are just some examples I'm showing you from early America where we celebrated ghost stories around the Christmas time. Now, the tradition itself is strongest in the UK, but It's globally coming back with podcast, modern literature, and things like that. Think about this. Even just a modern movie, The Polar Express. I swear, I asked several people about that movie, and I've seen it. I love the movie. Of course, we can have a whole nother episode on Santa Claus and, whether or not you promote Santa Claus in your house. I get that. But as far as it being a movie, I think it's an excellent movie. Now, do I promote Santa Claus? No, I don't. But as far as a movie goes, I think The Polar Express is a great movie. And think about The Polar Express. It is very ghostly, which I think is great that they've added this into our modern age of Christmas movies. It's very ghostly. The train operator is several people, in the movie, and he appears and shows up. One of them is a ghost. And it's just got this mystery feel to it. And that's added into the mystery of Christmas. And I think it just adds into the whole feels of Christmas time. And it's really interesting to study some of these things out. Now, before I get too lost in Christmas, we got to dial back into ghosts and the Bible. So let's do that. I want to share with you a few well known testimonies of pastors who reported seeing ghosts or apparitions, as some people would call it. And then after this, I'm going to give you some Bible verses and dive into a little bit of a Bible study. Now, I myself, I have not personally seen a ghost that I know of or can remember or claim to have seen a ghost. My dad sent me a video one time of an orb that followed him in an attic, which was a very interesting video. It's very simple, but it was very strange, and it was not anything like bodily shape, just a small little, floating looking ball. And it was unexplainable. We tried to explain it away, but after you look at the video, you can't explain it too good. But let me give you some of these stories from this pastor. So, Pastor B.G. Gordon Hargis from Missouri, he tells interviewers that he claimed that while he was serving in an old parsonage in rural Missouri, he and his wife began hearing footsteps, cabinet doors closing, and a woman humming hymns late at night. And he says one evening, Hargis reported seeing the faint figure of an elderly woman in a long dress standing at the end of the hallway. Later, older members of the congregation identified her description as matching a previous pastor's wife who had died in that home. And so this pastor says he insisted he did not believe in ghosts before this experience. Now, again, I'm telling you a couple stories that I found on the internet as far as pastors that say they've seen ghosts. Again, whether or not it's true 100%, we never know. But I'm just trying to stoke your mind for this topic of ghosts. Number two, Reverend Dr. Martin Hobson. He says this one's called The Man in the Balcony. This was actually published in the Methodist Church's newsletter in the 1970s. Hobson was a Methodist minister in Tennessee. He claimed that several times during late night prayer in his church, he saw a man sitting in the sanctuary balcony. When he approached, the figure vanished. Church history later revealed a deacon had died suddenly in that same balcony a generation later. But so Hobson said he wasn't, hostile. It was a figure that was peaceful and almost looked like it was praying. Number three, Father John A. Nicola. Now, this guy is an exorcism consultant who reported his findings to the Catholic Church. Now, again, I don't know that we should be doing exorcisms. I don't think that's something the Lord has called us to do. And of course, this says Father, so I assume this is Catholic. But it says that during interviews in 1970s, this priest. Um, Nicola was the priest consultant for The Exorcist. So I believe the movie. Nicola did not claim to see ghosts in the popular sense, but he did report that during several investigations, he witnessed figures he interpreted as wandering spirits, shadowy, indistinct forms that appeared briefly in hallways during exorcism preparations. He believes these were human souls in confusion, not demons. And of course, Catholics believe in purgatory, so this holding place until you either, I don't know, you go to heaven or hell. I'm not sure exactly how you enter from that holding place to the next place, but it makes sense. They would say, oh well, they might be in purgatory, they're wandering, they're confused souls. But Pastor Jim Hiltz, number 4, the walking pastor in the parsonage. This is a Pentecostal pastor in this 1990s charismatic testimony collection. He reported that after moving into an old parsonage, he frequently heard the distinct sound of footsteps on hardwood floors, even though the home was carpeted. And one night he claimed he woke to see a man in a minister's suit standing at the top or at the foot of his bed. The figure reportedly nodded and walked through the closed door. This man, his last name Hills. Hills believed he had seen a former pastor of the same church who died decades earlier. And number 5, Reverend Samuel Meeks, the churchyard visitor, is a Presbyterian man. So I got you all these different uh, denominational backgrounds, so you could see them in different lights. Now, it appears in a recorded oral history from this man that this man publicly recounted that while closing up his church late one night, he saw a luminous figure near the old cemetery gate. He assumed it was a person until it glided rather than walked, and when he approached, it vanished. The church had a history of Revolutionary War burials, and he always believed the figure was a soldier. Now, whether or not you believe all these stories, it makes you wonder, somewhere deep in your mind and heart, are these things real? Are ghosts real? Do things like this really happen? And it stokes a lot of our interest in the sense of mystery. And so we want to figure out if these things really are real. And jumping back into our Bibles and also the Polar Express, real quick. Again, love the movie. Now there's a line from the Polar Express, and I think this is really good. And so it says this: "Seeing is believing." So I believe the ghost says this to the boy, or maybe the train operator does. I'm not sure, but he says, "Seeing is believing, but sometimes the most real thing in this world are the things we can't see." And I believe that to be totally true. And so there's things about this life that we cannot see. That's biblical, it's scientific, and it's reasonable. What we see is not all there is to life. And I want to show you some verses in the Bible that really point to that. Colossians 1:16. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And so there are things visible and invisible, things that we cannot see. You say, what are some practical invisible things? There's gravity, right? But there's evidence of gravity. We're staying on the ground and we're all guided by those laws. There's oxygen. You can't see it, but we know we're breathing somehow after scientific studies now. And it seems that in the Bible, all through the Bible, there is a sense that there is a real spiritual world around us. Now, whether or not there's a certain time period where the veil to the spiritual world is, thinner than usual, I don't believe there is any real biblical evidence of a certain time period during the year that happens. Because dates and calendars, guys, that's just for us to keep up with time. But, every day is the same with the Lord. Um, but here we have a life that we live based on our sight, but there is way more than what we can see in this world. Now I'm gonna give you another story from the Bible that points to these invisible things. 2 Kings 6:15 through 17. So here's a story in the time of the kings where a man was going to battle, and Elisha is involved in this, and he wants the enemy to see the support that him and Israel have. Listen to this. This is interesting. And it says in verse 15, and when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, a host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. So this city in Israel is compassed with horses and chariots. They're about to be attacked. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? So he says, what are we going to do? He's talking to Elisha. What in the world are we going to do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And so Elisha is praying for the enemy to the Lord. And his prayer is, Lord, show this man, this enemy of ours that is surrounding us right now, show him the support that we have. Open his eyes and let him see it. And so here's the next part of verse 17. He says, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire around about Elisha. Man, one of the most interesting stories covering this. So God has to open the eyes of this man. And when he opens his eyes, not that he's blind, but that there's something he could not see. And when he does that, he sees this mountain full of these hosts of fire, chariots. I'm imagining angels standing there ready to fight for the nation of Israel. But God had to open his eyes so that he could see them. I believe even scientifically, and I have not completely studied this out. This is going based on scientific things that I've learned in high school and then a few going up into my college years. But even scientifically, you know that there are certain colors, there's certain lights that we cannot see with the human eye. A simple test of this can even be done on your cell phone. And I don't understand it all the way, but of course, you have to find an old remote controller, like to your TV, and it's got to have the little clear ball at the end of it. And when you push a button on it, it's got to be a certain type. I really don't know what type it is, but if you could find an old remote, put batteries in it, and at the end, it should have a little clear ball, right? And that's the signal that goes out to the TV. Well, if you take it and you click a button on it, you won't see anything at the end of that little ball. But if you take your camera, you turn it on and put your camera to the end of that and hit the button, you'll see a little purple light, in the camera. That's because our camera can see lights that our eyes cannot see. And I don't know how it's able to see it and then our eye can see it at that point. Maybe it, lessens the light or something. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, scientifically, even there are things we cannot see with our eyes. And so to believe that there is a spiritual world out there, something more than meets the eye, that's absolutely valid. It's biblical, it's scientific, it's all these things. And so I believe that we have a very good case when we're talking about ghosts, when we talk about the things we cannot see, the invisible things. And so I'm going to give you a couple of instances where I think there are ghosts mentioned in the Bible. A couple of instances. 1 Samuel 28:15. So this is a story where with Samuel and Saul. Samuel has passed away, and Saul received a lot of instruction from Samuel. Saul really depended on Samuel for all his spiritual guidance, and Saul was a very troubled king. Well, uh, after Samuel died, Saul was struggling very much with some things going on in his life, and he wanted to talk to Samuel again. He desperately wanted to talk to Samuel. Well, in his country, Saul had made the law that no person is to consult a wizard, a witch, or anybody that does this dark magic stuff. And he's now faced with a dilemma. He doesn't want to go to God. He's distant from God, but he wants to talk to Samuel, and he doesn't want to go through God to do it. And so he decides he's going to dress up secretly, and he's going to go and he's going to disguise himself, and he's going to go talk to a witch so that nobody would know he was doing it. And he was going to find one and ask her if he could, through her, talk to Samuel. So he goes, and it says that this witch is able to bring up Samuel from the grave, and Samuel is standing there talking to Saul. This is recorded in the Bible. This is 1 Samuel 28. So Samuel's standing there talking to Saul. So I'm going to give you a little bit of that. It says, and Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has parted from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets nor dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. And so right there in the next verses, Samuel and Saul are having a full-blown conversation, but Samuel is dead. And so here you have a body, a human body, that is on earth, that is dead. Now, this man is talking to Samuel. I'm sorry, talking to Saul. So you have a human that's dead talking to Saul. So I believe that's one of your first examples of a real ghost in the Bible. Now, also Matthew 17:3. Now, this is the story when Jesus is goes onto the mountain and he has what's called his transfiguration. He's seen as in his glorious state for just a little bit by Peter. And Peter sees what happens and he describes Matthew 17:3. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias talking with him. So here you have Jesus, he is in his actual physical body. And then you have Moses and Elijah who are dead standing right next to Jesus on top of this mountain. So you say, I don't think ghosts are in the Bible. Here's two instances where there are human people or spirits standing on earth. The first one next to Saul, a king of Israel, a real recorded king of Israel, and then Jesus Christ, a well recorded historical figure that is can be proven to be a real person in history. And it says two men were standing next to them that should have been dead next to him. Now, another one is Daniel chapter 5, verse number 5. So this is the part in the story of Daniel where there's a certain king, Belshazzar, that is having a feast and he cares nothing about God. He's not a man that fears God. Well, he's just having a feast and enjoying a party. And it says that out of nowhere, Daniel 5:5, in the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand. So a hand appears and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. So here's a ghost hand. You have a hand coming out of nowhere and drawing on the wall. And this king is extremely scared, and it says he even shakes at the knees because of these things. And so here's the question: are ghosts real? Well, it seems in the Bible that there are real instances where there are appearances of human figures on the earth. And so, can ghosts be real? From two perspectives. From the fact that there are real Bible stories that show us ghosts is good evidence that ghosts could be real. And then, not only the Bible evidence, but also the stories that you hear, and then the fact that we can't see everything with our eyes is a good point to it. So I believe that there could be ghosts, but what are they? What are they? Uh, it's not doesn't necessarily mean that they're human spirits walking this world. Now, if we go from a biblical standpoint, I don't think from the Bible standpoint that you can just freely walk the earth as a deceased person. I don't know that 100%, but I believe based on my biblical studies that once you die, you're either in heaven or in hell. And unless the Lord, for some reason, allows you to come down to do something, I don't believe you freely walk the earth as a deceased person coming down in your spirit. I believe it's possible. And so therefore, do I believe people have seen ghosts before? Yes, I believe that. And I believe for whatever reason, the Lord can allow that to happen because he's God. And so, do I believe there are ghosts? Yes. Do I believe sometimes it can be explained by some kind of natural phenomena? Yeah, absolutely. There are scientific things we don't understand that not all of us are, studied up on, and not even myself. But that happen, on a regular basis. That could be explained not as ghosts. And so I don't think that humans are freely allowed to walk the earth, although I think they can be allowed if the Lord allows them. And so you have Moses and Elijah um, standing there with the Lord. Then you have Samuel coming up from the grave, which the Lord allowed for some reason. And then also this hand that come out of nowhere in the Bible that was used to scare this king and also to show him his fate. And so I believe it's possible that ghosts can be here, but that they're not just, you don't just die and are cursed to, haunt your home or haunt um, whatever part of life you walked in. Now, what's more common in the Bible are demons. Now, if you believe in the Bible, you believe in Jesus Christ, the message of the gospel, the power of a changed life, and you believe the Bible is accurate and that you can trust it and follow it, you must also believe that there are demons. And then this stuff is real. We get in the back of our heads, all this stuff, that's fake. That's what we tell ourselves to help us with fear. We say, oh no, it's not real. These things are not real. Well, if you're a biblical Christian, you have to believe demons are absolutely real. They're absolutely a force to be reckoned with. In the Bible, there's somewhere around 80 to 120 times where demons are alluded to or mentioned directly. And there's also cases of people being demon possessed. The maniac of Gadara in Jesus' time, Jesus cast them out. Several times in the days of Jesus, he cast out demons and he exposed them. And in the Old Testament, there's demonic people, or there's demonic mentions. In the New Testament, there's demonic mentions. And so demons are very real. They're the workers of the devil. They're fallen angels. You could find some of that in Isaiah chapter 14, where it talks about the fall of Satan and his messengers. It tells us in the Bible that hell was made for the devil and his angels. And so his angels work on this earth. They are demons. They terrorize people. They want people to fall, to fail, to not go to God. They encourage people to sin. And also recorded in Revelation are these demonic figures that have a role in history, have a role in future times as well. And so when we're talking about ghosts, I believe more often if we encounter something dark, I think it's more often a demonic spirit, not necessarily a ghost as far as a human is concerned, a human coming back from the grave to walk the earth. It is possible again, but I think more likely it is a demonic presence. And by the way, as far as I'm concerned, I could be wrong on this. And so, somebody would have to tell me why, and we would have to talk back and forth from the scriptures. But as far as I'm concerned, we're not supposed to cast out demons. The Lord tells me to go in all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, teaching them to admonish all things whatsoever I've taught you. And that's the main goal, that people would be born again, that would be saved. I don't think our job is to fight demons. I think the Lord will cast out evil and darkness when people get saved. When people give their life to Christ, uh, the devil's power over them is relinquished, and there's nothing the demons can do to them at that point. Now, you say, how about your personal experience as far as demon goes? Two times I have been called out to houses that have apparently had cases of demon possession. You say, what do you do? Well, I don't perform an exorcism and I don't do ritual ceremonies or anything like that. I simply talk to the person and give them the gospel and share with them how they can be saved and become a new person. And because this is 100% true, if you give your life to Christ, you are no more under the power of sin and this world. No more. You've been freed from the power of darkness and made to walk in his marvelous light. And so if somebody gets saved, there is no power demons can have over them. The first one I went to in this case was a home. They said that the girl was experiencing some demonic activity. And the guy, he was my coworker at the time, was actually very scared. And we just talked to her about salvation and tried to encourage him and everything. And I don't know if it immediately helped her. She did not give her life to the Lord, but I prayed over the home, and and we talked to his daughter, and now to this day, and it wasn't just that incident, but to this day, after talking to that man from time to time and continuing to talk about my Christian experience. I talked to that man recently, and he says, "Thank you for all you've done, and encouraging me and directing me in God's word." He's closer to the Lord than he has ever been, he said. So I was encouraged to hear that. Now, the second one was an old friend from high school, and her daughter was experiencing some demonic stuff. Now, we brought her to the church, my wife and I, and we talked to her for probably 2 hours, and I talked to her about the Lord and gave her a good reason to believe in the Lord, and gave her the gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. She never did accept it, but she really had some good concerns and disbeliefs about the Bible that I was able to sit down with her and talk about and address. And the problem is her mama didn't believe her and wanted me just to tell her that demons were not real. Well, I've got to be biblical. And I told her they are real. It could be a very real possibility that someone's demon possessed, but the Lord can rescue you out of all those things. And so if we're ever encountering anything like that, just know the Lord Jesus Christ, salvation is the answer to that. So, guys, that's my take on ghosts and demons. Hope you enjoyed the show. Looking forward to being back with you. And hope you have a great Christmas season. Bible buddies, I hope you listened to that episode somewhere well lit and you weren't too scared. Hey, looking forward to being with you tomorrow as we talk about the Salem witch trials. This talk about ghosts has reminded me of that awful time period in history. And I want to talk to you about the Salem witch trials and really how an misunderstanding of the Bible really affects how we treat other people, and it causes a lot of confusion in our lives. Looking forward to being back with you again, sending those topics to the truly Christian podcast at gmail.com. I can't wait to address those issues for you. And coming up in the near future are more interviews that I hope you'll tune into and be encouraged by. And hope you have a good rest of your day. And Christian, keep it real.